The C-130 touched down on the dusty airstrip at Forward Operating Base Sentinel just after dawn, and Corporal Deanna Rothwell was the last one off. She carried her duffel with the same careful precision she applied to everything, movements economical and deliberate in the 100-degree heat that already shimmered off the tarmac. Around her, Marines and contractors hustled toward their assignments, but she moved at her own measured pace, taking in the perimeter walls, the guard towers, the distant mountains that ringed the valley like broken teeth. She had requested this assignment specifically. Logistics, supply coordination, as far from the front as she could get while still wearing the uniform. Nobody asked questions about a corporal volunteering for inventory duty in Afghanistan. They just assumed she was running from something back home, which in a way she supposed she was, though the thing she ran from had happened right here in these mountains 3 years ago. The logistics office was a converted shipping container with a struggling air conditioning unit that dripped condensation onto the plywood floor. Staff Sergeant Keiko Tanaka looked up from her clipboard as Rothwell entered, eyes narrowing slightly as she assessed the new arrival. Tanaka had the lean, watchful look of someone who had seen enough deployments to spot trouble before it started. "Welcome to Sentinel," Tanaka said. "You're Rothwell, right? Supply, coordination, and inventory management?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant," Rothwell replied. "Good. We are critically short-staffed. Previous coordinator rotated out 2 weeks early after taking shrapnel in a mortar attack. Nothing serious, but enough to send him home. You have experience with ammunition logistics?" Rothwell hesitated for just a fraction of a second, a pause so brief most people would have missed it. "Some," she said. "Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know what state you are watching from. Maybe you have known someone who carried hidden burdens from their service." Tanaka nodded and slid a thick binder across the desk. "Inventory manifests, requisition forms, and delivery schedules. SEAL team on base goes through ammunition like it is water, so stay on top of their requests. Commander Callahan will probably give you grief about response times. He gives everyone grief." Rothwell took the binder, feeling its weight. She had held heavier things. "I will manage," she said. The barracks assigned to logistics personnel sat on the quieter side of the base, away from the constant activity of the operations center. Rothwell claimed an empty bunk in the corner, the one with the best sight lines to both entrances, then immediately felt foolish for the instinctive choice. Old habits. She unpacked methodically, placing her few personal items in the footlocker. At the bottom of her duffel, wrapped in a soft cloth and tucked inside a hard case, lay something she had not intended to bring. Her hands touched the case, then pulled back as if burned. Not here, she told herself. That part of her life was over. She spent the afternoon familiarizing herself with the supply depot, a fortified warehouse that smelled of gun oil, cardboard, and the distinctive sharp scent of ammunition. Everything was cataloged with military precision, but the previous coordinator had let some of the paperwork slip. Rothwell found discrepancies immediately, her eye for detail something that had never left her even when she wished it would. She was cross-referencing ammunition counts when she heard voices outside, loud and confident. The door opened, and 4 men entered, all wearing the desert camouflage pattern that marked them as special operations. The one in front had the build and bearing of someone who expected doors to open before he reached them. Lieutenant Commander Brock Callahan, she guessed from Tanaka's description. Square jaw, cold blue eyes, and the kind of confidence that came from a decade of being told he was the best. "Who are you?" Callahan said. It was not quite a question. "Corporal Rothwell," she replied, not looking up from her inventory sheet. "Logistics and supply coordination." "Where is Davis?" "Rotated out. I am his replacement." Callahan exchanged glances with the man beside him, a chief petty officer with graying hair and thoughtful eyes. "We have a requisition for ammunition," Callahan said. 5,000 rounds of 7.62, 2,000 rounds of 50 caliber, and 6 cases of 40mm grenades. Rothwell pulled up the request on her tablet. "Your requisition is scheduled for fulfillment on Thursday," she said. "Thursday is 4 days away. We need it tomorrow. Then you should have submitted the request earlier. The requisition timeline is clearly stated. The other SEALs shifted and used to hearing their commander told no by a corporal in logistics. Callahan stepped closer, using his height advantage. "Do you understand who you were talking to?" Rothwell finally looked up, meeting his eyes with a calm that came from having faced much worse than an irritated officer. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm talking to someone who wants me to violate supply chain protocols and prioritization guidelines. If you need emergency authorization, you will need to go through Major General Brennan." For a long moment, silence filled the warehouse. The chief petty officer's lips twitched in what might have been suppressed amusement. Callahan's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Thursday, then," he said, and turned to leave. His team followed, but the chief glanced back at Rothwell with something that looked like respect. After they left, Rothwell returned to her inventory, hands steady as she made notations. She had come here to disappear, to be invisible, to let the weight of what she had done fade into routine and paperwork. But she could already feel the attention settling on her like crosshairs, and she knew from experience that once someone started looking closely, they would eventually see what she had spent 3 years trying to hide. 3 days passed in the comfortable anonymity of routine. Rothwell processed requisitions, organized shipments, and maintained inventory with the quiet efficiency that made her invisible. She ate meals during off-peak hours, kept conversations minimal, and stayed away from the training ranges where the sharp crack of gunfire echoed across the base like memories she did not want to revisit. At night, she lay in her bunk and counted the rivets in the ceiling until sleep finally came, dreamless and brief. On the 4th morning, she arrived at the supply depot before dawn to receive an ammunition shipment. The convoy had traveled through the night to avoid the heat and the increased Taliban activity during daylight hours. Rothwell signed for the pallets, then spent 2 hours verifying counts and checking for damage. Everything had to be perfect. In combat, a single defective round could mean the difference between living and dying, and she had learned that lesson in ways that still woke her in the dark hours before sunrise. She was alone in the armory annex when she heard footsteps. The connecting door opened, and Chief Petty Officer Vincent Madrigal entered, the same man who had accompanied Callahan during their first encounter. He carried a rifle case, the kind used for precision weapons, and stopped short when he saw her. "Corporal," he said, nodding. "Didn't expect anyone here this early." "Shipment arrived," Rothwell replied, gesturing to the pallets. "I wanted to get it processed before the heat becomes unbearable." Madrigal moved to the weapons rack, unlocking the cabinet where the specialized rifles were stored. He had the calm, methodical movements of someone who had spent years around firearms, treating them with respect rather than bravado. "Mind if I work while you are here?" he asked. "It is your armory too, Chief." He opened his case and withdrew a compact marksman rifle, beginning the familiar ritual of cleaning and inspection. Rothwell continued her inventory, trying to ignore the way her hands wanted to reach for the tools, to feel the weight of a rifle stock, to smell the distinctive scent of solvent and gun oil that meant precision and purpose and the thing she had been trying to forget. "You handled the commander well the other day," Madrigal said after a few minutes. "Most people fold when he pushes." "I was following protocol," Rothwell said. "Still, takes spine to tell a SEAL commander no." He paused in his work. "You prior service, or did you come up through logistics?" The question was casual, but Rothwell sensed the assessment beneath it. "Marines," she said. "Infantry background before I transferred to supply." "Infantry," Madrigal repeated, and something in his tone suggested he did not quite believe the simplicity of that answer. "Well, we are glad to have someone competent managing our supplies." Rothwell nodded, hoping the conversation would end there, but Madrigal kept glancing at her as he worked. She could feel his curiosity like pressure against her skin. Finally, she finished her count and prepared to leave, but as she turned, her boot caught on the edge of a pallet. She stumbled, not much, just enough to knock into the weapons rack. The case at the bottom shifted and fell open. A Barrett M82, a .150 caliber rifle, slid partially out, and Rothwell's hand shot out automatically to catch it before it hit the concrete floor. She steadied the weapon with the unconscious competence of someone who had handled such rifles 1,000 times, her fingers finding the proper balance points, her body adjusting for the weight distribution. For 3 seconds she held it, and in those 3 seconds she felt everything she had been running from come flooding back. Madrigal had frozen, watching her. "That is interesting," he said quietly. Rothwell quickly set the rifle back in its case, her heart hammering. "Reflex," she said. "Didn't want it damaged." That was not just reflex. That was familiarity. He stepped closer, his eyes sharp. "That Barrett has custom modifications. Adjustable cheek rest, modified trigger assembly, and a scope mount that costs more than most rifles. Why would logistics personnel know how to handle a weapon like that?" "I should get back to my inventory," Rothwell said, moving toward the door. "Corporal." Madrigal's voice stopped her. "I was a spotter for 8 years before I made chief. I know what someone with sniper training looks like. The way you balance that rifle, the way your eyes automatically check the scope alignment, even as you caught it, those are not things you learn in basic infantry training." Rothwell turned back, meeting his gaze. "With respect, Chief, my personnel file contains everything you are clear to know about my service history. If you have questions beyond that, you will need to direct them to my commanding officer." "Fair enough," Madrigal said, but his expression had shifted from curiosity to something closer to recognition. He looked at the Barrett, then back at Rothwell. "That is my personal rifle. I brought it because long-range precision is sometimes necessary in these mountains. But I have been shooting for 20 years, and I still treat that weapon like it might bite me." "You caught it like it was part of your arm." "Old habits," Rothwell said. "I need to go." She left before he could ask more questions, but she could feel his eyes following her out. In the harsh morning sunlight, she stood beside the ammunition pallets and forced her breathing to steady. 3 years she had managed to stay invisible. 3 years of pushing down the muscle memory and the skills that had once defined her. And it had taken 3 seconds of instinct to threaten everything. That evening, as she worked late updating inventory databases, she heard voices approaching the supply depot. She recognized Callahan's confident baritone before she saw him. The commander entered with Madrigal and 2 other SEAL team members, and the way Madrigal looked at her told Rothwell that he had shared his suspicions. "Corporal Rothwell," Callahan said, "I understand you had an interesting encounter with Chief Madrigal's rifle this morning." "It was an accident," Rothwell replied, keeping her voice neutral. "I prevented damage to equipment. That is part of my job." Callahan walked slowly around the desk where she sat, his boots echoing on the concrete floor. "The chief tells me you handled a Barrett 50 caliber like you had been doing it your whole life. That is a specialized weapon, not something they teach in basic supply training." "I am sure the chief is mistaken," Rothwell said. "I don't make mistakes about this," Madrigal said quietly. "I have trained dozens of snipers. I know what real experience looks like." Callahan stopped in front of her desk, placing both hands on the surface and leaning forward. "Who are you really, Corporal?" Because logistics specialists do not have the kind of familiarity with precision rifles that Madrigal described. "So either you're going to tell me the truth, or I'm going to start making phone calls until I find someone who will." Rothwell held his stare, weighing her options. She could stonewall, invoke privacy regulations, hide behind protocol. But she had learned long ago that some truths could not stay buried forever, especially not when someone like Madrigal had already seen through the facade. "I was a Marine Scout sniper," she finally said, "before I transferred to logistics. That is all you need to know." The words hung in the air like smoke. Callahan straightened, exchanging glances with his team. "A Scout sniper," he repeated. "And now you're doing inventory in a supply depot. That is quite a career change, Corporal. What happened?" "I requested reassignment. It was approved. End of story." "Nobody walks away from being a sniper to count ammunition crates," Callahan said. "Not unless something went very wrong." Rothwell said nothing. She had learned that silence often worked better than explanations, that people eventually filled quiet spaces with their own assumptions and moved on. But Callahan was not most people. He stood there waiting, his team flanking him, until the silence became its own form of pressure. "Tomorrow morning," Callahan said finally. 0600. Range 4. You're going to demonstrate this supposed sniper training because I don't put much stock in anyone who claims skills they cannot prove. That won't be necessary, Rothwell said. My reassignment was approved at the highest levels. I'm not required to justify it to you. This is my base and my area of operations. When I have personnel with specialized skills, I need to know what they are capable of. Consider it a direct order, Corporal. 0600. Dismissed. He left before she could protest further, his team following. Only Madrigal lingered for a moment, his expression thoughtful. For what it is worth, he said quietly, I don't think you are running from failure. I think you are running from success. I have seen that look before. But eventually, the thing you're good at finds you again. After he left, Rothwell sat alone in the supply depot, the hum of the ventilation system the only sound. She thought about refusing the order, about going to Major General Brennan and invoking the privacy clauses in her reassignment paperwork. But that would only make things worse, draw more attention, raise more questions. Better to give Callahan his demonstration, show him basic proficiency, and then fade back into anonymity. Except she knew it would not be that simple. The moment she picked up a rifle again, even just for a demonstration, she would feel the weight of everything she had tried to leave behind. That night, she barely slept. When she finally gave up at 4 a.m, she went to the armory where Madrigal's Barrett case still sat on the workbench. She opened it slowly, as if the rifle might somehow know her, might remember what she had once been. The custom modifications were immediately apparent to her trained eye. Someone had invested serious money and expertise into this weapon. She ran her fingers along the barrel, felt the precision of the trigger assembly, noted the high-end optics. It was a beautiful instrument designed for a singular purpose, and looking at it was like looking at a version of herself she had tried to kill. At 0545, she walked to range for carrying Madrigal's Barrett with his permission and a standard issue M40 as backup. The morning air was still relatively cool, the sun just beginning to paint the mountain peaks with gold. Callahan was already there with his entire 8-man team, along with Staff Sergeant Tanaka and a handful of other personnel who had heard about the demonstration. Word spread fast on small bases. Corporal, Callahan said, gesturing to the firing line. Show us what you have got. What distance? Rothwell asked. Start at 400 meters. We will work our way up if you can actually hit anything. 400 meters was insultingly basic for anyone with real sniper training, but Rothwell said nothing. She set up the M40 first, settling into a prone position that her body remembered despite 3 years away from it. The rifle stock fit against her shoulder like it had never left. She controlled her breathing, felt her heartbeat steady, let everything else fade away until there was only the target and the space between. She fired 5 rounds in smooth succession. Downrange, the target showed a tight grouping, all within the center ring. Adequate, Callahan said, though his tone suggested he was impressed despite himself. Try 600. Rothwell adjusted her position and scope, made the mental calculations that came as naturally as breathing, and fired another 5 rounds. Again, tight grouping, all center mass. 800, Callahan said. She switched to the Barrett now, feeling the increased weight, the different balance. This rifle wanted to reach out further, wanted to prove what it could do. She settled into position, became still in the way that made her almost invisible, and fired. The .50 caliber round cracked across the range like thunder. Direct hit. She fired 4 more rounds, each one finding its mark. Around her, she could hear the murmurs from the watching SEALs, the shift in their posture from skeptical to attentive. 1,200 meters, Callahan said, and now there was an edge to his voice, a challenge. Rothwell studied the target through her scope, reading the wind indicators, the heat shimmer, the subtle environmental factors that most people never noticed. She made minute adjustments to her scope, felt the rifle settle into perfect alignment, and squeezed the trigger with the gentleness of a breath. The round took 3 full seconds to reach the target. When it hit dead center, complete silence fell over the range. 1,600, Callahan said quietly. This was getting into serious distance now. The the kind of shooting that required not just skill, but understanding of physics, ballistics, environmental factors that changed moment to moment. Rothwell felt herself slipping into the old mindset, the place where nothing existed except the shot. She checked wind speed using the Mirage in her scope, factored in the temperature differential, made adjustments for the slight upward angle to the target. She fired. The wait felt eternal. Then the spotter behind the scope called out, center mass hit. The SEALs were no longer skeptical. They watched her with the focus of professionals recognizing another professional, someone who operated at a level few ever reached. Madrigal stood beside Callahan, arms crossed, a slight smile on his face. 2,000 meters, Callahan said, and his voice had lost its challenging edge. Now he was simply curious, wanting to see how far her skills extended. Rothwell rose from her position, checking the Barrett carefully. At this distance, everything mattered. A single degree of temperature change, a shift in wind direction, even the rotation of the Earth became factors in the equation. She studied the environment for a full 5 minutes, watching the flags, the dust patterns, the way the heat moved across the valley. When she finally settled back into position, she had become something else entirely. Not the logistics corporal trying to hide. Not the woman running from her past. She was the tool, and the rifle was her extension, both of them designed for this single purpose. She fired. For 0.7 seconds of flight time. For 0.7 seconds where everything hung suspended, where dozens of variables played out across 2,000 meters of air and heat and physics. The round struck within inches of center mass. Nobody spoke. Callahan walked to where she lay, looking down at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Where did you train?" he asked. "Quantico," Rothwell replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline singing through her veins. "Marine Scouts Sniper School. Top of my class. And your longest confirmed kill?" The question hung between them like a blade. Rothwell slowly rose to her feet, safing the Barrett, avoiding his eyes. "That information is classified," she said. "Ballpark," Callahan pressed. Rothwell met his gaze then, letting him see for just a moment what lay beneath the surface, the weight she carried, the reason she had run to logistics and inventory, and the safety of counting ammunition instead of using it. "Over 3,000 meters," she said quietly. "Confirmed. Verified. Record shot for the Marine Corps." The silence that followed was broken only by the wind moving across the range. Callahan studied her face, and she saw the moment he understood that he was not looking at someone who had failed, but someone who had succeeded too well, who had pushed the limits too far and paid a price that had nothing to do with missing the target. "I need to make some phone calls," he said finally. "Don't go anywhere, Corporal." Rothwell spent the rest of the morning in the supply depot, trying to focus on requisition forms and inventory spreadsheets, but her hands kept trembling. The shooting had awakened something she had worked hard to bury, and now it prowled inside her like a caged animal. She could still feel the Barrett against her shoulder, still smell the cordite, still taste that perfect moment of alignment when everything came together and the impossible became inevitable. She hated that she had loved it. At 1300 hours, Staff Sergeant Tanaka appeared at the depot entrance, her expression unreadable. "Major General Brennan wants to see you," she said. Now, Rothwell stood slowly, dread settling in her stomach. She had known this was coming. The moment Callahan started making phone calls, the moment her demonstration went beyond basic proficiency, she had known the carefully constructed walls around her past would start crumbling. The walk to the command center felt longer than 2,000 meters. Tanaka said nothing, but kept glancing at Rothwell with curiosity and something that might have been concern. When they reached the general's office, Tanaka knocked once and opened the door. "Corporal Rothwell reporting as ordered," Rothwell said, standing at attention. Major General Adelaide Brennan sat behind her desk, a woman in her late 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen 3 decades of military service. Beside her desk stood Callahan, arms crossed, and Madrigal, who looked at Rothwell with something approaching sympathy. "At ease," Corporal Brennan said. "Sit down." We need to have a conversation that is several years overdue. Rothwell sat, keeping her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap. She had been through interrogations before, knew how to present a calm exterior even when everything inside was chaos. Brennan opened a folder on her desk, though Rothwell suspected she had already memorized every word. Commander Callahan contacted me this morning with some very interesting information. He tells me you demonstrated sniper skills that exceed anything he has seen outside of the most elite special operations units. He also tells me you claimed a confirmed kill at over 3,000 meters. Since such a shot would be one of the longest in recorded military history, I think we need to discuss your actual service record. With respect, General, my reassignment included confidentiality protocols, Rothwell said. Those protocols were designed to protect you, not to keep you invisible forever. Brennan leaned forward. When you came to me 3 years ago and requested transfer out of Scout Sniper operations, I approved it because your psychological evaluations indicated you were struggling with combat trauma. I put you in logistics because I thought you needed time and space to heal. But I never intended for you to waste the extraordinary skills you possess. I am not wasting anything, Rothwell said. I am serving where I am needed. You are hiding, Callahan interjected, and I need to know why. This base faces regular threats. If I have someone with your capabilities, I need to know what you can and cannot do. Brennan raised a hand, silencing Callahan. She pulled a document from the folder, one that Rothwell recognized immediately. Classification markings covered the header, black bars redacting significant portions. This is the after-action report from Operation Silent Shepherd, September 2022. Your operation, the one that earned you a classified commendation and a one-way ticket to logistics. Commander, I'm going to share portions of this with you, but what you hear does not leave this room. Understood? Understood, Callahan said, his voice quiet now, sensing the weight of what was coming. Brennan began reading, her voice steady and professional. Marine Scout Sniper Team deployed to mountainous region of Helmand Province to provide overwatch for extraction of high-value intelligence asset. Team consisted of Corporal Deanna Rothwell, spotter, and Staff Sergeant Marcus Reeves, observer. Intelligence indicated low enemy activity in the sector. Rothwell closed her eyes, but closing them only made the memory sharper. Upon reaching observation point, Team discovered intelligence was compromised. Extraction team ambushed by enemy force estimated at 40 to 50 combatants. Extraction team pinned down, taking casualties approximately 3.2 kilometers from sniper position. Brennan paused, looking at Rothwell. 3.2 kilometers. That is over 2 miles, Corporal, beyond the effective range of nearly any weapon system. It was within range of the Barrett, Rothwell said quietly, her voice hollow. Brennan continued. Enemy commander directing ambush from elevated position. Estimated distance 3,247 meters from sniper team location. Staff Sergeant Reeves' advised shot was impossible due to extreme range, environmental factors, and target movement. Corporal Rothwell requested permission to engage. Permission granted as no other options remained. The room had gone completely silent. Even Callahan seemed to have stopped breathing. Corporal Rothwell calculated windage, elevation, temperature, barometric pressure, and Coriolis effect. First shot missed by approximately 12 meters. Rothwell made corrections. Second shot impacted 3 meters from target. Third shot eliminated enemy commander with headshot. Confirmed kill at 3,247 meters. Enemy force lost cohesion. Extraction team successfully evacuated with assets secured. Madrigal let out a slow breath. 3 shots, he said, at over 3 kilometers. That is not just skill. That is something else entirely. Brennan was not finished. During exfiltration, sniper team engaged by separate enemy unit. Staff Sergeant Reeves killed in initial contact. Corporal Rothwell held position alone for 7 hours, protecting extraction route, verified 11 additional enemy kills before friendly forces reached her location. She was found sitting beside her spotter's body, rifle empty, having used every round of her kit. Rothwell felt tears threatening and forced them back. She had not cried in 3 years. She would not cry now. The psychological evaluation afterward, Brennan said softly, indicated severe combat trauma, survivor's guilt, and an inability to separate her identity from her role as a sniper. The evaluating psychiatrist recommended immediate removal from combat operations. I agreed. She looked at Rothwell with something approaching compassion. You saved 16 lives that day, Corporal. You accomplished something that should have been impossible, but cost your best friend and nearly destroyed you in the process. Callahan had moved to the window, staring out at the mountains. How accurate is she now? He asked. After 3 years away from it? You saw the demonstration, Brennan replied. What do you think? I think, Callahan said slowly, that we have a serious problem. He turned back to face them. We have been tracking increased Taliban activity in the region for the past 2 weeks. Intelligence suggests they are planning something significant. My team can handle most threats, but if they attack from the kind of distances Corporal Rothwell can engage at, we're going to need someone who can reach back. No, Rothwell said, the word coming out harder than she intended. I'm not doing that again. Nobody is ordering you to do anything, Brennan said. But Commander Callahan raises a valid concern. This base is vulnerable to long-range attacks. Your skills could save lives. My skills got my best friend killed, Rothwell said, her voice breaking slightly. Marcus died because I was too slow making those calculations, because I needed 3 shots instead of 1, because I was so focused on that impossible shot that I did not see the enemy force moving on our position until it was too late. You held that position for 7 hours, Madrigal said quietly. You protected the extraction route. You did your job. My job got him killed, Rothwell said, and I'm done with that job. She stood abruptly, fighting the emotions threatening to overwhelm her carefully maintained control. Permission to be dismissed, General. Brennan studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Dismissed, Corporal. But this conversation is not over. Rothwell left the office, walking quickly through the compound, ignoring the curious stares from personnel who had heard about the morning's demonstration. She made it to the supply depot, locked the door behind her, and finally let herself lean against the wall, breathing hard. The Barrett was still in its case where she had left it after cleaning it. She looked at it and felt the weight of 3,247 meters, felt the weight of Marcus Reeves dying while she counted seconds for a bullet to fly, felt the weight of being too good at something that required pieces of your soul as payment. Outside, the mountains watched in silence, keeping their secrets about what was coming. For 2 days, Rothwell buried herself in work. She processed requisitions with obsessive attention to detail, reorganized the entire ammunition storage system, and volunteered for every inventory task that kept her away from people and their questions. The base had started looking at her differently. Word of the demonstration had spread, and now, when she walked through the compound, conversation stopped. Marines nodded with respect. Even the SEALs gave her space, though she could feel their assessment in every glance. Only Madrigal approached her, and that was on the 3rd morning when he found her conducting a pre-dawn inventory of medical supplies. He stood in the doorway of the warehouse, not quite entering, respecting the boundary she had drawn around herself. You cannot hide forever, he said simply. Watch me, Rothwell replied, not looking up from her clipboard. The commander is not going to let this drop. We have a mission brief this afternoon. Intelligence has confirmed Taliban movements in the mountains, and they want your input. I do logistics now, Chief. Someone else can handle the tactical planning. Madrigal stepped inside, closing the door behind him. I was a spotter for 8 years, he said. I worked with some of the best shooters in the Navy. But I never worked with anyone who could do what you did at that demonstration. And I sure as hell never worked with anyone who made a 3,000-meter shot in combat. That shot killed my best friend, Rothwell said, finally meeting his eyes. No, the enemy killed your friend. You saved 16 other people. There is a difference. The math does not work out in my favor, Chief. 16 people I will never meet versus the one person who knew me better than anyone. Marcus would have told me not to take that shot. He would have said it was impossible, that we should call in air support, that we should wait. But I did not listen because I thought I could make the impossible happen. And you did, Madrigal said softly. That is the burden of being exceptional at something. You can do things others cannot, which means you carry responsibilities others do not have to face. Rothwell set down her clipboard, her hands shaking slightly. Do you know what it feels like to watch your calculations play out in real time? To know that if you are wrong by even a fraction of a degree, people die? To squeeze a trigger and then wait 5 seconds, wondering if you just wasted the last chance to save lives? I can imagine, Madrigal said. No, you cannot, because you were not there. You did not watch Marcus get hit. You did not spend 7 hours alone with his body, shooting at shadows, waiting to die yourself. You did not have to tell his wife that he died, because I needed him to spot an impossible shot. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Madrigal nodded slowly. You are right. I was not there, but I know something about survivor's guilt. I know about losing people you care about, and I know that hiding from what you are does not honor their sacrifice. Do not talk to me about honoring sacrifice, Rothwell said, her voice hard. You do not get to use Marcus to manipulate me into picking up a rifle again. That is not what I am doing. But whether you like it or not, there are Taliban fighters in those mountains planning something. And if they attack this base from long range, people are going to die. Marines who have families. Kids who enlisted because they wanted to serve. All of them counting on us to protect them. Then you protect them, Rothwell said. You're a train spotter. Callahan has other snipers on his team. They can handle it. Not at the distances we were talking about. The intelligence suggests the Taliban have acquired some kind of long-range capability. Maybe a Russian sniper, maybe captured NATO equipment. Whatever it is, standard engagement ranges might not be enough. Rothwell felt ice forming in her stomach. What kind of distances? Madrigal pulled a folded map from his pocket and spread it on the supply crate between them. His finger traced a ridgeline approximately 3 kilometers from the base perimeter. Intelligence indicates they are setting up observation posts here. Perfect sight lines to our command center, the vehicle depot, and the ammunition storage. If they have the right equipment and the right shooter, they could cause catastrophic damage before we could respond. 3 kilometers. The number hung in the air like an accusation. Rothwell stared at the map, her mind automatically calculating angles, wind patterns, defensive positions. She hated that her brain still worked this way, still saw the world in terms of ranges and trajectories. There are counter-sniper protocols, she said. Smoke screens, reactive measures, air support. All which take time. Time that people might not have if someone starts putting 50 caliber rounds into our fuel depot. Madrigal folded the map. I'm not asking you to be our primary defense. I'm asking you to come to one briefing. Listen to the intelligence. Let your expertise inform our planning. That is all. Rothwell wanted to refuse. Every instinct told her to walk away, to maintain the wall she had built, to protect herself from the thing that had nearly destroyed her. But she looked at the map and saw not tactical positions, but faces. Tanaka, who had welcomed her. Young Marines who reminded her of Marcus. Even Callahan, arrogant as he was, who had people depending on him. One briefing, she said finally. But I'm not making any promises beyond that. The briefing room was crowded when Rothwell entered that afternoon. Callahan stood at the front beside a large screen showing satellite imagery. His 8-man SEAL team occupied the front row, along with Major General Brennan, several company commanders, and security personnel. Every head turned when Rothwell entered, and she felt the weight of their expectations like a physical pressure. Corporal, Callahan said, gesturing to an empty seat near the front. Thank you for joining us. Rothwell sat, keeping her expression neutral. Madrigal took the seat beside her, and she noticed he had brought his tablet with detailed topographical maps already loaded. Callahan began without preamble. Intelligence has confirmed significant Taliban movement in sectors 7 and 9 over the past 72 hours. Increased radio chatter, repositioning of forces, and the arrival of what appears to be specialized equipment. We assess the probability of an attack on this base within the next week at 75% or higher. The screen changed to show thermal imaging of figures moving through mountain passes at night. Brennan leaned forward in her seat, her expression grim. "What kind of specialized equipment?" one of the company commanders asked. "We are not certain," Callahan admitted. "But signals intelligence picked up references to a gift from friends in the north. Given recent Russian activity in the region, we assess this could be advanced sniper systems, possibly even anti-material rifles. Like a Dragunov or an Orsis," Madrigal said. "Or worse," Callahan replied. The screen switched to show the base layout with threat vectors marked in red. "Our primary concern is long-range attack on critical infrastructure. They have clear sight lines from multiple elevated positions. Standard defensive perimeters may not be adequate." Rothwell studied the screen, her tactical mind working despite her resistance. The Taliban had chosen their positions well. From those ridgelines, a skilled shooter could devastate the base before anyone could respond. The fuel depot, the ammunition storage, the command center, all vulnerable, all within range. "Corporal Rothwell," Brennan said, addressing her directly. "Given your unique experience, what is your assessment?" All eyes turned to her. Rothwell took a slow breath, feeling Marcus beside her the way she always did when facing these decisions. "If they have a competent shooter and decent equipment," she said slowly, "they can engage effectively out to 2,000 meters, possibly further with the right conditions. At those distances, your standard counter-sniper measures will be inadequate. By the time you locate the shooter and respond, significant damage will already be done." "What do you recommend?" Callahan asked. There was no challenge in his voice now, only professional respect. Rothwell stood, moving to the map. She pointed at several positions. "You need early warning systems here, here, and here. Acoustic sensors to detect shots. You need designated counter-sniper positions with clear fields of fire to these ridgelines. And you need someone who can reach out to 3,000 meters if necessary, because if they're setting up at maximum range, standard engagement protocols will not be enough." The room had gone quiet. "Someone who can reach 3,000 meters, Callahan repeated. "Do you know anyone with that capability, Corporal?" Rothwell met his eyes, and in that moment she saw not manipulation, but simple truth. People were going to die if she walked away. Marines who had families waiting for them. Young soldiers who had never had the chance to prove themselves. All of them depending on decisions made in this room. She thought of Marcus, of what he would say if he were here. He would tell her that running away did not honor his sacrifice. He would tell her that being good at something terrible was still better than letting innocent people die. "I know one person," Rothwell said quietly, "but she's going to need assurances that this is purely defensive. No offensive operations. No targeting anyone unless they fire first." "Agreed," Brennan said immediately. "Purely defensive posture. And I need a spotter I can trust," Rothwell continued, looking at Madrigal. "Someone who understands the stakes and will not second-guess me when seconds matter." "I volunteer," Madrigal said without hesitation. Rothwell closed her eyes briefly, feeling the old identity settling back on her shoulders like a familiar coat she had tried to throw away. When she opened them again, she was no longer just a logistics corporal trying to hide from her past. She was a weapon being aimed at a threat, and everyone in the room knew it. "When do we start?" she asked. Preparation began immediately. Rothwell spent the next morning in the armory with Madrigal, going through his Barrett with the meticulous attention that had once been second nature. She checked every component, tested the trigger pull weight, verified the scope zero, and made minor adjustments that only someone with her level of experience would notice. The rifle was excellent, well-maintained, but it was not hers. It did not know her yet, and she did not know it. "The ballistics are slightly different from what I trained with," she told Madrigal as they worked. "The barrel harmonics, the recoil pattern, even the way the scope settles after each shot. I will need time to learn this weapon's personality." "How much time?" Madrigal asked. "In a perfect world, a month. In reality, maybe 3 days before I would trust it at extreme range." She looked at him directly. "If they attack before then, I cannot guarantee precision beyond 2,000 meters. 2,000 meters is still twice what anyone else on this base could do reliably. Madrigal handed her a data book, the kind snipers used to record every shot, every condition, every variable. Start fresh. Build your dope from scratch. I will spot for you, but the calculations are yours. They spent the afternoon at the range, but this time there was no audience, no demonstration. This was work, methodical and demanding. Rothwell fired at 600 meters, then 800, then 1,000, recording every detail. Wind speed, temperature, humidity, the subtle differences in how the Barrett behaved compared to the rifle she had used 3 years ago. Madrigal spotted through high-powered optics, calling corrections, providing wind readings, falling into the rhythm that defined the relationship between sniper and spotter. You are compensating for something, he observed after her 8th shot at 1,200 meters, favoring right by about half a minute of angle. Old habit, Rothwell admitted. My previous rifle pulled slightly left. This one is not. Trust the weapon. Let it do what it was built to do. She fired again, this time without the compensation. The round struck dead center. Madrigal smiled slightly. There she is, he said. The shooter everyone talks about. That shooter got people killed, Rothwell reminded him. That shooter saved 16 lives. The distinction matters, Corporal. They worked until the sun began setting behind the mountains, painting the valley in shades of orange and red that reminded Rothwell of tracer fire. By the time they finished, she had filled 12 pages in the data book with detailed notes. It was not enough, not nearly enough, but it was a foundation. That evening, she sat in the supply depot alone, cleaning the Barrett one more time. The familiar ritual calmed her, the precise movements, the smell of solvent, the mechanical simplicity of maintaining a tool designed for a single purpose. She thought about Marcus, about how he used to joke that she loved her rifle more than she loved him. It had not been true, but she understood why he said it. When she held a rifle, when she looked through a scope, she became something clearer than her normal self. All the complexity of being human distilled into pure purpose. The door opened, and Tanaka entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one beside Rothwell without asking, then leaned against the supply crate. I heard you were back in the game, she said. Temporarily, Rothwell replied. Purely defensive. Still, takes courage to pick up something you walked away from. Tanaka sipped her coffee. For what it is worth, I'm glad you are watching over us. Makes me feel safer knowing you are up there. I am not a guardian angel, staff sergeant. I am just someone who can shoot accurately at long distances. Maybe that is the same thing in this place. Tanaka stood to leave, then paused. I lost a friend in Kandahar. Sniper shot from a ridgeline, over a kilometer away. We never even saw where it came from. Sometimes I still think about that, about how helpless we were. So yeah, I'm glad you're on our side. After Tanaka left, Rothwell sat with the coffee growing cold in her hands. She had never thought about it from that perspective, about what it felt like to be the one targeted by someone with her skills. She had always been the one behind the scope, calculating, adjusting, squeezing the trigger. The targets had been abstractions, threats to be eliminated, problems to be solved with ballistics and mathematics. But they had been people too, with friends who would sit in the dark wondering why they had been powerless to help. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Callahan assigned her the highest observation point on the base, a reinforced position that offered 360-degree views of the surrounding terrain. Madrigal helped her set up, positioning sandbags, establishing range cards, marking every potential approach with precise measurements. They worked in comfortable silence, 2 professionals preparing for a job neither wanted, but both understood was necessary. On the second evening, Rothwell was studying topographical maps when a young Marine appeared at her position. Private First Class Omar Khoury, barely 20 years old with nervous energy and eager eyes. He saluted awkwardly. Corporal Rothwell, he said, I heard you were the one who made that 3th shot. Is that true? Where did you hear that? Rothwell asked, not looking up from her maps. Everyone knows. They say you saved a whole platoon, that you held off an entire enemy force by yourself. Khoury stepped closer, his voice dropping. I want to be a sniper someday. Could you maybe teach me something? Rothwell finally looked at him, seeing Marcus in his face, seeing every young soldier who thought combat was glory and skill rather than terror and trauma. Being a sniper is not what you think it is, she said. It is not about the shooting. It is about watching people die through a scope and living with what you have done. But you saved lives, Corey protested. I also took them, and every single one of them stays with you. You do not get to forget. You do not get to pretend it was just doing your job. She stood, facing him directly. If you want to be a sniper, private, understand that you're choosing to carry weight that never gets lighter. Marcus Reeves was the best spotter in the Marine Corps, and he died because I needed him to help me make an impossible shot. That is the cost of this job. Corey's enthusiasm faltered. I did not know, he said quietly. Nobody does until they are in it. Rothwell softened slightly. If you still want to pursue it after this deployment, talk to me again. But understand what you were signing up for. After Corey left, Madrigal emerged from the shadows where he had been setting up communications equipment. You were hard on him, he observed. I was honest with him. Nobody was honest with me when I started. They told me about precision and skill and serving your country. Nobody mentioned that you would spend the rest of your life seeing the faces of people you killed, wondering if they had families, if the intelligence was right, if that shot was truly necessary. Was it, Madrigal asked, the shot that killed Marcus? Was it necessary? Rothwell looked out at the mountains, at the darkness gathering in the valleys. 16 people got to go home because of that shot. 16 families did not get flag-draped coffins and memorial services. So yes, it was necessary, but that does not make it hurt less. Madrigal nodded, accepting her answer. He handed her a radio headset. Communications check. We are on encrypted channel 7. If something happens, you call it, and I will relay to command. Understood. Rothwell tested the radio, hearing the clear confirmation in her ear. She looked at Madrigal, this man who had volunteered to be her spotter, who would be beside her if things went wrong. You know the risks, she said. Spotters do not usually survive when snipers get overrun. I know, Madrigal replied, but someone has to do it, and I would rather it be someone who understands what you have been through. Marcus was your friend. Let me honor his memory by keeping you alive. The words settled something in Rothwell, some piece of the guilt she had carried. She extended her hand, and Madrigal shook it, sealing the partnership. That night, she lay in her position under the stars, the Barrett beside her like a sleeping companion, and waited. Intelligence suggested the attack would come soon, possibly within 48 hours. Somewhere in those mountains, enemy fighters were making their own preparations, checking their own weapons, calculating their own shots. And when they finally revealed themselves, she would be ready. Not because she wanted to kill again, not because she had conquered her trauma or made peace with her past, but because sometimes the only way to prevent death was to be willing to deliver it first, precisely and without hesitation, at distances that turned human beings into mathematics and moral complexity into simple geometry. She closed her eyes and felt Marcus beside her, the way he always was when she needed him most. This one is for you, she thought. For all of us who carry what cannot be put down. The attack came on the third night, not with the dramatic assault Rothwell had anticipated, but with silence that felt wrong. She had been on watch for 6 hours, trading shifts with Madrigal every 4 hours to maintain alertness. At 0200 hours, she noticed the absence before the presence. The normal sounds of the valley had stopped. No insects, no distant animal calls, nothing but wind moving through the darkness. Madrigal, she said quietly into her radio. Something is off. I feel it too, he replied from his position 15 meters away. The night is too quiet. Rothwell scanned the ridgelines through her night vision scope, searching for movement, heat signatures, anything that would explain the unnatural silence. The moon was a thin crescent, offering minimal light, which meant either the Taliban were waiting for dawn or they were moving in darkness, confident in their knowledge of the terrain. Then she saw it, a brief thermal bloom on the eastern ridgeline, approximately 2,800 meters distant. Someone had lit a cigarette or activated electronic equipment, just for a second, but enough. Contact, she transmitted. Eastern ridgeline, Grid reference 87433. Single thermal signature. Madrigal swung his spotting scope to the location. Confirmed. I see one, possibly two individuals. They are setting up something. Could be observation, could be weapons platform. Callahan's voice came through the radio, calm and professional. Rothwell, what is your assessment? She studied the position through her scope, watching the faint heat signatures move with purposeful efficiency. They are establishing a firing position, she said. Elevated location with clear sight lines to our command center and fuel depot. I assess hostile intent. Can you engage? Rothwell checked her rangefinder. 2,817 meters. Wind is variable, gusting from the northeast at approximately 8 to 12 knots. Temperature has dropped 3 degrees since sunset. She ran the calculations in her mind, the mathematics that had once been effortless but now required conscious thought after 3 years away. I can engage, but at this range and with these conditions, probability of first-round hit is approximately 60%. Wait for positive identification of hostile action, Brennan's voice cut in. We follow rules of engagement. They must fire first. Understood, Rothwell replied, though every instinct screamed at her to take the shot now, to eliminate the threat before it could materialize. This was the difference between defense and offense, the line she had insisted on, and now she had to trust it even as her finger rested against the trigger guard. The minutes stretched. Rothwell watched the thermal signatures coalesce into clearer shapes. 3 individuals now, definitely setting up equipment. The distinctive outline of a heavy weapon became visible, long barrel extending toward the base. That is a rifle, Madrigal said. Large caliber. Maybe a Dragunov, maybe something bigger. Rothwell's heart rate stayed steady, her breathing controlled, but inside she felt the old fear rising. If they fired first, if they hit something critical before she could respond, people would die. The fuel depot was particularly vulnerable. One well-placed round could trigger a catastrophic explosion. Stand by, she transmitted, maintaining observation. Movement across the base increased as personnel responded to the alert. Marines moved to defensive positions. Callahan's SEAL team deployed to secondary observation points, and the operations center went to full alert status. But all of it felt slow compared to what could happen in the seconds after that enemy rifle fired its first shot. The enemy sniper settled into position. Through her scope, Rothwell could see the deliberate movements of someone with training, someone who knew what they were doing. They were adjusting their scope, ranging targets, going through the same pre-engagement checklist she had performed countless times. They are preparing to fire, she reported. Request permission to engage on their first shot. Granted, Brennan replied immediately. The moment they fire, you are authorized to respond with lethal force. Rothwell settled deeper into her position, becoming one with the rifle, with the sandbags, with the darkness itself. Madrigal provided continuous updates on wind conditions, atmospheric changes, the subtle environmental factors that would affect a bullet's flight over nearly 3 kilometers. She made microscopic adjustments to her scope, bringing the crosshairs to rest on the enemy sniper center mass. This was the moment she hated most. The waiting, the knowing that violence was coming but being powerless to prevent it. She thought about Marcus, about how he used to talk her through these moments with bad jokes and inappropriate comments that somehow made the tension bearable. But Marcus was 3 years dead, and she was alone with a stranger who was professional but not her friend, facing an enemy who wanted to kill her people. Movement, Madrigal said sharply. The weapon is traversing. They are aiming at something. Target, Rothwell asked. Madrigal consulted his map, calculating based on the weapon's orientation. Looks like they are aiming at the operations center. If they hit the communications array, we lose contact with command authority. Rothwell adjusted her aim fractionally, leading the target slightly to account for the time delay between her shot and impact. Her finger moved from the trigger guard to the trigger itself, taking up the slack. Every muscle in her body was coiled and ready, but her hands remained perfectly steady. Muzzle flash, Madrigal called. They are firing. The night lit up with the distinctive flash of a large caliber rifle, and Rothwell squeezed the trigger in the same instant, the Barrett roaring beside her ear, the recoil driving into her shoulder with familiar violence. She did not wait to see the impact. Her hands moved automatically, working the bolt, chambering a fresh round, reacquiring the target. Hit, Madrigal confirmed. Target down. Secondary targets are scattering. Rothwell tracked the movement, seeing two figures breaking from the position, abandoning their fallen comrade. She could take them, had clear shots on both, but they were no longer immediate threats. Stand by, she transmitted, waiting for hostile action from secondary targets. One of the figures stopped, turning back, raising what looked like a radio. Coordinating, Rothwell observed. They are calling for support. Then the valley erupted. Mortar rounds began falling on the base, not accurate, but close enough to be dangerous. Muzzle flashes appeared on multiple ridgelines as fighters who had been waiting in darkness opened fire. This was not a sniper duel. This was a coordinated assault, and the sniper team had been the trigger. Multiple contacts, Callahan's voice cut through the radio traffic. All units to defensive positions. Rothwell, we need you to start clearing those ridgelines. Rothwell shifted her aim to the nearest muzzle flash, a machine gun position approximately 2,000 meters northwest. She calculated quickly, adjusted, and fired. The muzzle flash stopped. She moved to the next target, and the next, falling into a rhythm that felt both foreign and familiar. Each shot was a decision. Each trigger pull a small death that might save larger lives. Madrigal called wins, ranges, corrections, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. Mortar fragments whistled overhead. Small arms fire crackled from multiple directions. But in their elevated position, they remained focused on the long-range threats that standard infantry could not reach. Contact, Eastern Ridgeline, Madrigal called. New sniper position, different location from the first. Range 3,100 meters. Rothwell swung her rifle, finding the target through her scope. This range was at the edge of even her capabilities, especially with the variable winds and the angle. Can you confirm range? She asked. Madrigal worked his laser rangefinder. 3,127 meters. Wind gusting 15 knots, shifting northeast to east. Target is mobile, not stationary. A moving target at over 3 kilometers. This was approaching impossible, the kind of shot that required not just skill but luck. Rothwell watched the target through her scope, seeing the figure move between rocks, setting up, breaking down, searching for the right position. A professional, someone who understood counter-sniper tactics. She thought about Marcus, about that day 3 years ago when she had attempted the impossible and succeeded at terrible cost. She thought about the 16 people who lived because of that shot, and the one person who died because she had needed him there to make it. The mathematics were the same now. Risk one to save many. The eternal calculus of combat. Madrigal, she said quietly, if I miss this shot, that sniper is going to find us. They are good. They are hunting for us right now. I know, Madrigal replied. Take your time. Make it count. Rothwell settled into the perfect stillness that only came in these moments. Her heartbeat slowed. Her breathing became almost imperceptible. The chaos of the battle faded until there was only the target, the distance, the wind, and the bullet waiting to bridge the space between intention and outcome. The enemy sniper stopped moving, settling into a position, bringing their rifle to bear. They had found something to shoot at, maybe the operations center, maybe a defensive position, maybe even her. In 2 seconds they would fire, and someone would die. Rothwell squeezed the trigger. The Barrett spoke its thunderous word into the darkness, and the bullet began its long flight across 3,127 meters of air and night and the space between living and dying. 5 seconds. That was how long the bullet took to cross 3,127 meters of darkness. 5 seconds where Rothwell held her breath, where Madrigal watched through his spotting scope, where the enemy's sniper steadied their own aim at whatever target they had chosen. 5 seconds where the mathematics of wind and gravity and the Coriolis effect played out in the space between certainty and chance. "Hit," Madrigal said, his voice carrying relief and respect. "Center mass. Target eliminated." Rothwell did not feel triumph. She felt the weight of another life added to the count she carried, another face she would never see but would always know existed. She worked the bolt, chambering a fresh round, already searching for the next threat. This was the truth of combat that no one talked about. You did not get to stop and process. You did not get to feel. You just moved to the next target and hoped your humanity survived long enough to matter when the shooting finally stopped. The battle intensified. Taliban fighters pressed toward the base perimeter, using the darkness and their knowledge of terrain to probe for weaknesses. Callahan's SEAL team engaged targets at close and medium range, while Rothwell eliminated threats that existed beyond the reach of standard weapons. She fired 18 times over the next 40 minutes, each shot carefully calculated, each one finding its mark. Machine gun positions, mortar teams, what appeared to be a command element coordinating the assault from a ridgeline 2,400 meters distant. "Ammunition check," Madrigal said during a brief lull. 4 rounds left in this magazine, 2 full magazines remaining. Rothwell's voice was steady despite the exhaustion creeping through her body. The Barrett was hot from sustained fire, the barrel radiating heat she could feel through her gloves. This was something else they did not teach in training. How heavy a rifle became after hours of use. How your shoulder bruised from recoil. How your eyes burned from staring through a scope in the darkness. "Water," Madrigal said, pressing a bottle into her hand. "Drink. You're no good to anyone if you're dehydrated." She drank, tasting dust and exhaustion, then returned to her scope. The assault was losing momentum. Taliban forces were pulling back, dragging their wounded, leaving their dead. Rothwell had killed or wounded at least 9 confirmed targets, and the psychological impact of losing fighters to an invisible enemy was evident in their increasingly disorganized movements. "They are breaking," Callahan transmitted, "maintaining defensive posture, but the pressure is easing." "Rothwell, that was exceptional work. How many rounds do you have left?" 26, Rothwell replied. "Enough for a sustained engagement if they regroup and try again. Stand by your position. We will send up resupply at first light." The next 3 hours passed in tense silence. Rothwell and Madrigal maintained their watch, scanning for any sign of renewed attack, but the Taliban had withdrawn to lick their wounds. As the sky began lightening in the east, painting the mountains in shades of gray and pink, the base began assessing damage. Miraculously, casualties were light. 3 wounded Marines, none critically. 1 destroyed vehicle. Minor damage to several structures from mortar fire. It could have been catastrophic. Without Rothwell's intervention, the enemy snipers would have picked apart key personnel and infrastructure before the base could mount an effective defense. Tanaka arrived at first light with fresh ammunition, water, and food. She looked at Rothwell with something approaching awe. "The commander says you eliminated 9 confirmed threats," she said. 3 of them at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters. "People are calling it the most effective defensive sniper operation in recent history." "It was just doing what was necessary," Rothwell said quietly. "No, Corporal. It was exceptional." Tanaka set down the supplies. "The general wants to see you when you are ready to stand down." No rush, but she wanted you to know. After Tanaka left, Rothwell and Madrigal maintained their position for another 2 hours until Callahan arrived with a relief team. He climbed up to their position, moving with the cautious respect of someone entering sacred ground. When he reached them, he looked at Rothwell for a long moment before speaking. "I owe you an apology," he said. "When you first arrived, I dismissed you as just another support person filling a slot. I was wrong. What you did last night saved lives, possibly dozens of them. You gave us the edge we needed against an enemy who thought they had us outmatched." "I was just following orders, sir," Rothwell replied. "No, you were doing what you do better than anyone I have ever seen." Callahan extended his hand. "Thank you, Corporal, from me and from everyone on this base." Rothwell shook his hand, feeling the strange disconnect between his gratitude and her own emptiness. She had saved lives, yes, but she had also taken them. 9 people who would not go home, who had families somewhere waiting for news that would never come, who had made the same choice to fight that she had made. The moral mathematics never balanced, no matter how you calculated them. Get some rest, Callahan said. We will maintain security. You have earned it. Rothwell and Madrigal broke down their position, carefully packing the Barrett, collecting their equipment, moving with the mechanical efficiency of exhaustion. As they descended from their elevated position, Rothwell noticed Marines stopping what they were doing to watch her pass. Some nodded. Others saluted, even though she was just a corporal and military protocol did not require it. She did not know how to receive their respect, this acknowledgement of skills she had spent 3 years trying to bury. Private Corey approached as she neared the supply depot, his young face serious. "Corporal," he said, "I saw what you did. I did not see it directly, but I heard the reports. You saved us. You saved all of us. I did my job private. It was more than that." Corey hesitated, searching for words. "I have been thinking about what you said, about the cost of being a sniper. I think I understand better now. It is not about the glory. It is about being willing to carry something heavy so others do not have to." Something in his words pierced through Rothwell's exhaustion. "Yes," she said softly. "That is exactly what it is. And once you pick it up, you never really put it down." "Would you still teach me?" he asked. "Not the shooting. I can learn that anywhere. But how to carry it, how to live with it." Rothwell looked at this young Marine who reminded her so much of Marcus, who had Marcus's idealism and earnestness, and she felt something shift inside her. Maybe Marcus had not died for nothing. Maybe the lesson she had learned at such terrible cost was worth passing on, if it could help someone else navigate the darkness. "After this deployment," she said, "if you still want to learn, come find me. But understand that what I will teach you is not how to be a killer. It is how to remain human while doing a killer's work." "That is exactly what I need to learn," Corey said. Rothwell finally reached her bunk and collapsed onto it without even removing her boots. Sleep came immediately, dark and dreamless, her body claiming the rest it desperately needed. But even in sleep, part of her remained alert, still counting rounds, still calculating distances, still feeling the weight of the Barrett against her shoulder and the weight of 9 more lives added to the total she carried. She woke 6 hours later to find Madrigal sitting nearby, also freshly rested, reading a technical manual on ballistics. He looked up when she stirred. "Intelligence reports the Taliban suffered significant casualties," he said. "They're estimating at least 15 killed, twice that wounded. The survivors are reporting a ghost shooter who could hit targets from impossible distances. You have them spooked." "Good," Rothwell said, sitting up slowly, feeling every bruise and ache. "Maybe they will think twice before attacking this base again. The general wants us to maintain the defensive position indefinitely. Rotating shifts, but you are now officially the base's long-range counter-sniper asset." She paused, measuring his reaction. "How do you feel about that?" Rothwell considered the question. 24 hours ago, she would have said no immediately, would have fought to return to the anonymity of logistics. But something had changed during the battle. Not redemption, not healing, but maybe acceptance. She was good at this terrible thing, and people were alive because of that skill. "I feel like I found something I thought I had lost," she said finally. "I do not know if that is good or bad yet. Maybe it is just what it is," Madrigal offered. "Maybe we do not have to judge it. We just have to use it well." Rothwell nodded, appreciating his pragmatism. She stood, feeling the familiar ache of muscles that had held tension for hours, and looked out of the mountains. Somewhere out there, Taliban commanders were regrouping, planning their next move, possibly bringing in more skilled fighters to counter her presence. This was not over. It was just beginning. But for the first time in 3 years, Rothwell felt ready for what came next. Not eager, not happy, but ready. And sometimes, in war, ready was the best you could hope for. The intelligence arrived 3 days after the failed assault. Signals Intercept had picked up chatter about a specialist being brought in from Pakistan, someone with a reputation for eliminating high-value targets at extreme ranges. The Taliban were not retreating. They were escalating, responding to Rothwell's effectiveness by bringing in their own expert. Brennan called an emergency briefing at 1400 hours. Rothwell entered the command center to find it more crowded than before. Callahan and his team, company commanders, intelligence officers, and several people she did not recognize wearing civilian clothes that screamed agency affiliation. Everyone turned when she entered, and she felt the weight of their expectations like a physical pressure. Corporal Rothwell, Brennan began without preamble. We have credible intelligence that the Taliban have contracted a foreign sniper specifically to neutralize you. Someone with extensive experience, possibly former military from a hostile nation. The threat assessment puts this individual at the highest skill level. Do we have identification? Madrigal asked. One of the civilians stepped forward, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the confident bearing of someone who dealt in secrets. We believe it is a Russian national named Dmitry Volkov, formerly of the Russian Special Operations Forces. He has a confirmed record of at least 23 kills as a mercenary, many at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. He specializes in counter-sniper operations. So they're bringing in someone to hunt me specifically, Rothwell said, keeping her voice level despite the chill running down her spine. Yes. The civilian pulled up a photo on the screen, showing a lean man in his late 30s with cold eyes and a professional bearing. Volkov does not miss. Every contract he has taken, he has fulfilled. You need to understand the level of threat we are discussing here. Rothwell studied the photo, seeing in Volkov's eyes something she recognized from her own mirror. This was someone who had made peace with being a weapon, who had stopped struggling against what they were and simply became it. She respected that even as she knew it made him more dangerous. When does intelligence suggest he will arrive? She asked. He may already be here, the civilian replied. We lost track of him 48 hours ago near the Pakistan border. He could be positioning now, studying our base layout, identifying your location. Then we need to change our defensive posture, Callahan said. Rotate sniper positions, vary patrol patterns, make ourselves unpredictable. That might buy us time, Rothwell said, but it will not solve the fundamental problem. If Volkov is as good as you say, he will adapt. This becomes a duel, and duels end when someone makes a mistake, or when someone is simply better, Madrigal added quietly. The briefing continued for another hour, discussing security protocols, counter-surveillance measures, all the tactical responses to a threat that ultimately came down to two people with rifles trying to kill each other across impossible distances. When it finally ended, Rothwell walked out into the afternoon heat, feeling the peculiar calm that came before violence. She had been in this position before, knowing someone was hunting her, knowing the next shot could come from anywhere at any time. Madrigal found her on the perimeter, looking out at the mountains with her bare eyes rather than through a scope. We could request your transfer, he said. Get you out of here before Volkov makes his move. Run again, you mean? Rothwell shook her head. I spent 3 years running. It did not make anything better. At least here I know what I am running from. You're not running anymore, though, are you? No. I think I'm finally standing still. She turned to face him. If something happens, if Volkov gets me, I need you to know that working with you these past weeks has reminded me why I became a sniper in the first place. It was not about killing. It was about protecting people who could not protect themselves. You helped me remember that. Nothing is going to happen, Madrigal said firmly. We're going to find Volkov before he finds you, and we're going to eliminate the threat. They spent the next 2 days in a state of heightened alert. Rothwell varied her position constantly, never staying in one place for more than 6 hours. She studied the terrain obsessively, identifying every location within 3,000 meters that could serve as a sniper hide. She made herself unpredictable, random, impossible to pattern. But she knew that Volkov was doing the same calculations, making the same assessments, searching for the one moment of vulnerability that every human eventually showed. On the third morning, Private Corey brought her breakfast at her current position, a reinforced observation post on the western side of the base. He set down the tray and lingered, clearly wanting to say something. "Speak freely, Private," Rothwell said. "Is it true there's a Russian sniper coming to kill you specifically?" he asked. "Yes. And you're just going to stay here and wait for him? What would you have me do, Private? Run? Hide? That is not how this works. When someone comes hunting you, you have two choices. You can be prey, or you can be the hunter who is simply letting them think they are hunting you." Corey absorbed this, his young face troubled. "I do not want you to die, Corporal. You're the best chance this base has. Then help me stay alive. Keep your eyes open. Report anything unusual, any change in patterns, any feeling that something is wrong. Volkov will make a mistake eventually. Everyone does. We just have to be alert enough to see it." After Corey left, Rothwell continued her surveillance, but her mind kept returning to the essential problem. Volkov was a professional who knew she was here, knew she was skilled, and was planning accordingly. He would not make obvious mistakes. He would wait for the perfect opportunity, the one moment when all factors aligned in his favor. Her advantage was that she knew this base, knew the terrain, had spent weeks studying every angle and approach. His advantage was that he could take his time while she had to maintain constant vigilance. The stalemate broke on the fourth night. Rothwell was on watch when her radio crackled with Tanaka's voice, urgent and strained. "Corporal, we have reports of movement on the northern ridgeline, approximately 3,200 meters. Single individual appears to be establishing a position." Rothwell swung her rifle toward the coordinates, her heart rate accelerating despite her training. Through her night vision scope, she could see a thermal signature moving with practiced efficiency. Too obvious, she thought immediately. "This is a decoy. Hold fire," she transmitted. "That position is too exposed for someone with Volkov's experience. He is drawing my attention." "Then where is he?" Callahan asked over the radio. Rothwell thought like a hunter, like someone who understood how predators thought. "If I wanted to kill me," she said slowly, "I would use a decoy to make me focus on one direction while I set up in the opposite direction, using my muzzle flash to reveal my exact location." She spun her scope around, scanning the southern approaches, the area she had been ignoring while watching the obvious threat. There, a glint of glass reflecting starlight, so brief she almost missed it. "Southern ridgeline," she transmitted. "Approximately 2,900 meters. That is him." "How can you be sure?" Brennan asked. "Because that is exactly what I would do." Rothwell adjusted her scope, trying to get a clear view of the position. The angle was difficult, the target well concealed, but she could see enough to know someone was there, someone who knew how to hide. "We need to confirm before you engage," Callahan said. "Rules of engagement still apply." "He's going to fire at that decoy," Rothwell said. "He thinks it is me. When he does, I will have maybe 3 seconds to locate his muzzle flash and return fire before he realizes his mistake and relocates." The next minute stretched into eternity. Rothwell remained perfectly still, her crosshairs hovering over the position where she believed Volkov was hiding. Madrigal was beside her, spotting through his scope, both of them barely breathing. "Muzzle flash," Madrigal said sharply. "Southern ridgeline, exactly where you called it." The night lit up with the distinctive signature of a large-caliber rifle. Rothwell saw the flash, saw the exact position, and fired in the same instant. The Barrett roared, the recoil driving into her shoulder, and she was already working the bolt, chambering a fresh round, reacquiring the target for a follow-up shot. But there was no movement from Volkov's position. No return fire. No indication of life. "Did I get him?" Rothwell asked, not daring to hope. Madrigal stared through his spotting scope for a long moment. "I see a thermal signature, but it is not moving. Either you hit him, or he is playing dead to draw you out." This was the critical decision. If Volkov was wounded but alive, he would be waiting for her to expose herself by checking her work. If he was dead, the threat was over. But she could not know without confirming, and confirming meant risk. "I'm going out there," she said. "Negative," Callahan transmitted immediately. "Too dangerous. We will send a team at first light." By first light, he could be gone if he is alive, or other Taliban forces could have secured the position. Rothwell stood, checking her sidearm. I am going. Madrigal, you have Overwatch. I am coming with you, Madrigal said. No, someone needs to cover me, and you are the best spotter I have. If Volkov is alive and tries to shoot me, you take him out. Madrigal clearly wanted to argue, but recognized the tactical logic. Be careful, he said finally. Marcus would never forgive me if I let something happen to you. The walk across the valley took 40 minutes, every step measured and deliberate. Rothwell moved with her sidearm drawn, using night vision goggles to navigate the rocky terrain while maintaining awareness of her surroundings. Behind her, Madrigal watched through his scope, ready to provide covering fire if needed. Ahead, the position where Volkov had fired from remained silent and still, neither confirming death nor revealing life. She approached from an angle that minimized her exposure, using the terrain for cover. The position was well chosen, a natural depression in the rocks that provided concealment and a clear field of fire toward the base. Professional work. Exactly what she would have selected. 20 meters out, she saw the rifle first. A Russian Orsi's T-5000, one of the finest precision weapons in the world, lying across the rocks with its scope still oriented toward the decoy position. Then she saw the body. Volkov lay on his side, the left side of his chest showing a massive wound where a .50 caliber round had struck. She approached cautiously, weapon ready, but she could see from the thermal signature that he was gone. The shot had been nearly perfect, slightly left of center, but devastating nonetheless. He had died quickly, probably within seconds. Rothwell stood over the man who had been sent to kill her, feeling the strange emptiness that always followed taking a life. Volkov had been someone's son, maybe someone's father, certainly someone who had walked a similar path to her own. They had both become weapons, both learned to kill at distances that turned human beings into mathematics. The only difference was that she had been fractionally faster, marginally more accurate, or simply luckier. Target eliminated, she transmitted. Volkov is confirmed dead. Copy that, Callahan replied. Secure the position. We are sending a team to your location. Rothwell knelt beside Volkov's body, performing the ritual that all soldiers understood. She closed his eyes, checked for identification, and examined his equipment with professional respect. His rifle was immaculate, his gear top quality, his preparation meticulous. He had done everything right except for one miscalculation. He had assumed the decoy would work because it should have worked. Against almost anyone else, it would have worked. She found a letter in his vest pocket, written in Russian, but the photograph tucked inside needed no translation. A woman and 2 children smiling at the camera. A family. People who would receive news that would shatter their world, just as Marcus's wife had received news 3 years ago. I am sorry, Rothwell said quietly to the dead man. You were good at this, but so was I, and someone had to lose. Callahan arrived 30 minutes later with a 6-man team. They secured the scene, photographed everything, and began the process of recovering Volkov's body and equipment. Callahan stood beside Rothwell, looking down at the fallen sniper. Hell of a shot, he said. 2,900 meters in darkness, moving target behind concealment. That should not have been possible. It almost was not, Rothwell admitted. If he had been 2 degrees more to the left, my round would have missed completely. Sometimes the difference between success and failure is smaller than we want to admit. They walked back to the base together as dawn began breaking over the mountains. The light painted everything in shades of gold and red, beautiful and indifferent to the violence that had occurred in the darkness. Rothwell felt exhausted, not physically but in her soul, the kind of tired that sleep could not fix. At the base, word of Volkov's death had already spread. Marines watched her pass with a mixture of awe and wariness, as if she had crossed some invisible line into a realm they could not follow. She understood the look. She had become the thing that people whispered about, the sniper who could not be stopped, the weapon that had eliminated one of the world's most dangerous professionals. Brennan was waiting in her office. She dismissed everyone else and gestured for Rothwell to sit. Coffee appeared, strong and black, and for a few minutes they sat in silence. That was extraordinary work, Brennan finally said. Volkov had a reputation spanning 3 continents. Intelligence services around the world will be relieved to know he is no longer operational. I killed a man, Rothwell said flatly. That he was skilled at the same terrible thing I am skilled at does not make it less of a death. No, it does not. Brennan leaned back in her chair. But it does mean that dozens of people who might have died at his hands will live instead. The mathematics of your work are always going to be complicated, Corporal. You take one life to save many. That does not make it easy, but it does make it necessary. Marcus used to say something similar. It did not help him when it mattered. Marcus died protecting an extraction team, protecting you, protecting the mission. His death was not your fault, and deep down you know that. Brennan's voice softened. But knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are different things. You have been punishing yourself for 3 years for the crime of being exceptional at a job that requires terrible choices. What am I supposed to do instead? Rothwell asked. Celebrate? Take pride in being able to kill people from distances they cannot imagine? No, but you could accept that this skill you have, this terrible gift, has saved more lives than it has taken. You could acknowledge that running from it did not make you less responsible for it. And you could start believing that maybe Marcus would want you to use what he helped you become, rather than waste it counting ammunition in a supply depot. The words settled into Rothwell like bullets finding their mark. She sat with them, feeling their weight, recognizing their truth even as she resisted their implications. I do not know how to be this without it consuming me, she admitted. Then learn, Brennan said simply. Work with Madrigal. Teach that young private who keeps asking about you. Find a way to be human while doing inhuman work. Others have managed it. You can too. After leaving Brennan's office, Rothwell found Madrigal waiting outside. He fell in a step beside her without speaking, respecting the silence she needed. They walked to the supply depot, to the place where she had tried to hide from herself for 3 years, and found it exactly as she had left it. Inventory sheets, requisition forms, the comfortable mundanity of logistics work that asked nothing of her soul. I cannot go back to this, she said quietly. I know, Madrigal replied, but I do not know how to go forward either. How do you do it, Chief? How do you live with what we do? I remember why we do it. Madrigal gestured toward the base, toward the Marines going about their duties. Every person here gets to go home because of what we did. That does not erase the cost, but it gives it meaning. And I surround myself with people who remind me that I am more than just the weapon I carry. Rothwell thought about Private Corey, eager to learn. About Tanaka, who had welcomed her. About Callahan, who had gone from dismissive to respectful. About Madrigal himself, who had volunteered to be her spotter, knowing the risks. She had been so focused on what she had lost that she had not seen what she was gaining. Will you keep working with me? She asked. As my spotter? It would be my honor, Madrigal said. They spent the rest of the day breaking down the defensive positions and establishing new ones. The threat from Volkov was eliminated, but there would be others. The Taliban would not stop trying simply because they had lost 2 engagements. And somewhere in the world, other Volkovs existed, other professionals who would eventually be contracted to eliminate threats like her. That evening, Rothwell sat at her new position and watched the sunset paint the mountains in impossible colors. Beside her, the Barrett rested in its case, cleaned and ready. She thought about Marcus, about Volkov, about all the people whose lives had intersected with hers across distances measured in kilometers and decisions measured in fractions of seconds. She was not healed. She did not know if healing was even possible for someone who had done what she had done. But maybe Brennan was right. Maybe the goal was not to heal, but to integrate, to accept that she was both the woman who mourned every death and the sniper who delivered them with precision. Both things could be true simultaneously. Both things were true. Madrigal joined her as the last light faded, bringing coffee and food. They sat together in comfortable silence, 2 professionals who understood that some things did not need to be spoken. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new decisions about who lived and who died. But tonight, she was simply a soldier sitting with a friend, watching the darkness gather, and feeling for the first time in 3 years that maybe she could carry the weight after all. Not because it had gotten lighter, but because she had finally stopped trying to put it down. The Taliban's final assault came 2 weeks later, not with stealth but with overwhelming force. Intelligence had warned that they were massing for one decisive attack, throwing everything they had at forward operating base Sentinel in a desperate attempt to claim a victory after their previous failures. What Rothwell had not anticipated was the scale. She was at her observation post when the attack began at 0400 hours. The mountains lit up with muzzle flashes from at least 50 positions simultaneously. Mortars rained down on the base in coordinated barges. Machine gun fire poured from multiple ridgelines. This was not a probing attack or a tactical strike. This was an all-out attempt to overrun the base through sheer weight of firepower. All units to defensive positions, Brennan's voice cut through the radio traffic. This is not a drill. We are under sustained assault from multiple vectors. Rothwell settled behind the Barrett, her heart steady despite the chaos erupting around them. Madrigal was already beside her, spotting through his scope, calling out priority targets. The defensive plan they had spent 2 weeks refining went into effect immediately, but even with preparation, the numbers were overwhelming. Western Ridgeline, machine gun position, 2,100 meters, Madrigal called. They're chewing up our perimeter defenses. Rothwell acquired the target, adjusted for wind and angle, and fired. The machine gun went silent. She moved to the next target without pause, then the next. The Barrett became an extension of her will, each shot precisely calculated and delivered. But for every position she eliminated, 2 more seemed to appear. We're not going to be able to shoot our way out of this, she told Madrigal. There are too many of them. Then we buy time for the base to mount a proper defense. Keep shooting. She did. For 30 minutes, she fired continuously, working through magazines, her shoulder aching from recoil, her eyes burning from staring through the scope. Around them, the base's defenses held, but barely. Marines fought from every position. Callahan's SEAL team moved like ghosts through the compound, eliminating infiltrators, and the operations center coordinated defensive fire with desperate efficiency. Contact, Madrigal called urgently. Northern Ridgeline, 3,100 meters. That looks like a command element. Multiple personnel, communications equipment, someone directing the assault. Rothwell swung her rifle toward the coordinates, finding the position through her scope. Madrigal was right. She could see at least 6 individuals clustered around what appeared to be radio equipment, one of them clearly directing operations by the way others deferred to him. The Taliban commander orchestrating this entire assault. The range was extreme, the target was partially concealed, and the conditions were far from ideal. Wind gusted unpredictably from multiple directions. Smoke from burning vehicles obscured parts of her sight line. The angle required maximum elevation adjustment. This was another impossible shot, the kind that should not work, the kind she had learned to make anyway. I need a wind call, she said to Madrigal. He watched his indicators, using every tool at his disposal to read the invisible currents of air. Variable winds, gusting 12 to 18 knots from the northeast, shifting to east-northeast. Temperature has risen 4 degrees since the assault started. He paused, calculating. Call it 15 knots from the east, but expect variation during flight time. Rothwell made her adjustments, accounting for distance, wind, temperature, the Coriolis effect at this extreme range, even the slight upward angle that would affect trajectory. She thought about Marcus, about how he would have talked her through this shot with inappropriate jokes that somehow calmed her nerves. She thought about the 16 lives saved by her last impossible shot, and the hundreds that might be saved by this one. She slowed her breathing, feeling her heartbeat steady to the rhythm she had trained in a muscle memory. The chaos around them faded until there was only the target, the distance, and the space between intention and execution. Send it, Madrigal said quietly, confirming he had done everything he could to give her accurate information. Rothwell squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared, the massive round leaving the barrel at over 2,800 feet per second, beginning its 5-second journey across 3,100 meters of air in mathematics and hope. She did not wait to see the impact. Her hands moved automatically, working the bolt, chambering a fresh round, reacquiring the position for a follow-up shot. This was the discipline that separated professionals from amateurs. You never assume success. You always prepared for the next shot. Hit, Madrigal called, his voice carrying shock and admiration. Direct hit on the command element. I see multiple personnel down. The commander is definitely among them. Within 60 seconds, the change in the assault was visible. The coordinated fire began, losing synchronization. Attacks that had been precisely timed became scattered and disorganized. Units that had been advancing with purpose began hesitating, looking for orders that would not come. The Taliban had lost their orchestrator, and without central direction, their overwhelming assault began falling apart. Keep pressure on them, Callahan transmitted. They are breaking. Do not let them regroup. Rothwell continued engaging targets, but now she was hunting rather than defending. She eliminated fighters trying to rally others, took out the few remaining machine gun positions, and systematically dismantled what was left of the Taliban's command structure. Madrigal fed her targets faster than she could service them, but she kept pace, each shot finding its mark with the precision that had made her legendary. The assault collapsed within 20 minutes of losing their commander. Taliban fighters withdrew in disorder, abandoning equipment, and wounded in their haste to escape. The base had held. Against impossible odds, outgunned and outnumbered, forward operating base Sentinel had survived because one person could deliver precision death at distances the enemy thought made them safe. As the last of the attackers disappeared into the mountains, Rothwell finally allowed herself to relax. Her shoulder throbbed from recoil. Her hands shook from adrenaline. Her eyes felt like they were full of sand. But she was alive, the base was secure, and the people she had been protecting were still breathing. How many shots? Madrigal asked quietly. Rothwell checked her remaining ammunition. 47 rounds fired. If the math held from previous engagements, that meant at least 30 confirmed hits, possibly more. 30 people who would not go home. 30 families who would receive devastating news. The mathematics of her work never stopped being terrible, even when they were necessary. Brennan's voice came through the radio, steady and formal. Corporal Rothwell, report to the command center when you are able. Excellent work today. They broke down their position slowly, neither rushing nor lingering. Rothwell cleaned the Barrett with the same methodical care she always applied, giving the weapon the respect it deserved for performing flawlessly under extreme conditions. Madrigal organized their equipment, making notes in his data book about conditions and performance metrics. You know this changes everything, Madrigal said as they worked. What you did today, that shot on the command element at 3,100 meters under combat conditions, that is going to be studied in sniper schools for decades. You just saved everyone on this base. I did my job, Rothwell said, but even she could hear the lack of conviction in her voice. She had done more than her job. She had done something exceptional, something that only a handful of people in the world could have accomplished. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel something other than guilt about it. Walking back to the command center, Rothwell noticed the change immediately. Every Marine they passed stopped and saluted, even though protocol did not require it. Private Corey and a group of younger soldiers stood at attention as she went by, their faces showing respect bordering on reverence. Even Tanaka, who had welcomed her on the first day, looked at her with something approaching awe. Callahan was waiting outside the command center. When he saw her, he came to attention and rendered a perfect salute. On behalf of everyone on this base, he said formally, "Thank you for your service today. You saved lives, Corporal. You saved my team. You saved this entire operation. Whatever happened in your past, whatever ghost you carry, I want you to know that today you were exactly what we needed you to be." Rothwell returned the salute, feeling the weight of his words. 3 years ago, she would have rejected them, would have focused on the deaths rather than the lives saved. But Brennan was right. She could be both the person who mourned and the person who delivered death with precision. Both things were true. Both things were her. "Thank you, sir," she said simply. Inside the command center, She found organized chaos as personnel assessed damage and coordinated recovery efforts. Miraculously, base casualties were light. 8 wounded, none critically. Considering the scale of the assault, it was nothing short of a miracle, and everyone knew whose skill had made that miracle possible. Brennan pulled her aside into her office, closing the door on the activity outside. She did not speak immediately, just looked at Rothwell with an expression that combined pride, concern, and understanding. "I am recommending you for the Navy Cross," Brennan said finally. "What you accomplished today goes beyond extraordinary. It was historic. The longest confirmed combat shots in modern military history, delivered under the most challenging conditions imaginable, saving hundreds of lives." "I do not want a medal," Rothwell said quietly. "I know, but you're going to get one anyway, because what you did deserves recognition." Brennan leaned forward. "More importantly, I'm going to make sure your service today is properly documented. The classified parts of your record need to remain classified, but the broader military community needs to know what is possible when skill meets courage meets necessity." 3 months later, Rothwell stood on a stage she had never wanted to be on, wearing dress blues she had not worn in years, listening to words she could barely process. The ceremony was being held at Camp Pendleton, far from the mountains of Afghanistan, far from the place where mathematics and violence had intersected to save lives. Major General Brennan read the citation while hundreds of Marines stood at attention, their faces reflecting pride in what one of their own had accomplished. For extraordinary heroism in combat operations against enemy forces, the citation began, but Rothwell stopped listening to the formal language. She looked out at the assembled faces and saw the people who mattered. Madrigal stood in the front row, wearing his own dress uniform, his expression showing the quiet pride of someone who had been there, who understood what the words really meant. Callahan and his SEAL team occupied an entire section, having traveled specifically for the ceremony. Private Curry stood with other young Marines, his eyes bright with the idealism that had not yet been tempered by the realities Rothwell carried. And in the back, standing slightly apart, she saw Marcus's widow. They had not spoken since the funeral 3 years ago, but their eyes met across the distance, and something passed between them. Not forgiveness, because there was nothing to forgive. Not absolution, because guilt was not something that could be erased. But recognition, understanding, an acknowledgement that Marcus's death had meant something, that the skills he had helped her develop had saved hundreds of lives in the years since his loss. Brennan pinned the Navy Cross to Rothwell's uniform, the weight of it nothing compared to what she already carried, but somehow it felt right anyway. This was not about pride or glory. This was about accepting that she had done something extraordinary, something terrible, something necessary. All 3 things at once, without contradiction. After the ceremony, people approached in a steady stream. Officers she had never met shook her hand. Instructors from sniper school wanted to discuss her techniques. Young Marines asked for advice about pursuing scout sniper training. She answered their questions with the same honesty she had given Corey, making sure they understood the cost alongside the capability. Callahan found her during a brief moment alone. "My team voted," he said without preamble. "We want to offer you a position as a contractor working with SEAL sniper programs. Training, consultation, occasional field work if you are willing. The pay is substantially better than corporal wages, and you would have input on how and when you are deployed." Rothwell considered the offer carefully. A year ago, even 3 months ago, she would have refused immediately. But now she understood something she had not before. Running from her skills had not made her less responsible for them. Hiding had not honored Marcus's memory. The only way forward was through acceptance and intentional use of what she was. "I have conditions," she said. "No offensive operations. No targeting anyone who has not demonstrated hostile intent. And I want to be involved in training programs that teach snipers how to process what they do, not just how to do it." "Agreed," Callahan said immediately. "We need more people who understand both the technical and psychological aspects of this work. When can you start?" "After I do something I should have done 3 years ago." She found Marcus's widow in the parking lot. preparing to leave. The woman turned as Rothwell approached, and for a moment they just looked at each other, two people connected by loss and circumstance. "I am sorry," Rothwell said, the word she had needed to say for so long finally finding voice. "I am sorry I needed him for that shot. I am sorry he died protecting me. I am sorry that being good at something terrible cost you the person you loved." Marcus's widow, a woman named Helena, with kind eyes and graying hair, shook her head slowly. "He wrote me a letter," she said quietly, "to be opened if he died in combat." "Do you know what it said?" Rothwell shook her head, unable to speak. "He said that if he died, it would be because he was helping you do something impossible that would save lives. He said you were the best sniper he had ever seen, and that spotting for you was an honor. He said if his death meant you survived to use your skills to protect others, it was a trade he made willingly." Helena pulled an envelope from her purse, worn from being read many times. "He knew the risks. He chose them, and he was proud to be your spotter." Rothwell felt tears threatening for the first time in 3 years. "I have saved a lot of people since he died," she said, her voice breaking. "Hundreds, maybe, but it does not balance. It does not make losing him acceptable." "No," Helena agreed. "It does not balance, but it gives his death meaning. That is all any of us can ask for." She stepped forward and hugged Rothwell, surprising them both. "He will be proud of you," she whispered. "Stop punishing yourself for surviving. Honor him by being what he helped you become." After Helena left, Rothwell stood in the parking lot feeling something shift inside her. Not healing, not forgiveness, but maybe the beginning of integration. She was the woman who mourned Marcus. She was also the sniper who had saved hundreds of lives with skills he had helped refine. Both things were true. Both things were her. Madrigal found her there, giving her space but staying close. "Ready to move forward?" he asked. "I think so," Rothwell replied. "What does that look like for you?" "I accepted a position as chief instructor at the Scout Sniper School. Someone needs to teach the next generation not just how to shoot, but how to carry it." He smiled slightly. "I was hoping you might consider joining the program. You have more to teach than anyone I know." Before Rothwell could answer, Private Corey approached, his young face serious but determined. "Corporal," he said, then corrected himself. "Mung. I submitted my application for Scout Sniper School. My packet was accepted. I start training in 6 weeks." "Good," Rothwell said. "And when you get there, look for me. I will be the instructor who tells you the truth about what you are signing up for." "That is exactly what I need," Corey said. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about your favorite moment, or tell us about someone you know who found peace with their difficult past. The next morning, Rothwell drove to a quiet hillside overlooking the Pacific Ocean. She had brought the Barrett, cleaned and maintained with the same care she always applied, in a single round. This was not about shooting. This was about acknowledgement. She set up the rifle, not aiming at anything, just holding the way she had held it in Afghanistan, in training, in all the moments that had defined who she had become. She thought about the 3,247-meter shot that had killed Marcus. She thought about Volkov lying in the rocks with his family photo. She thought about the Taliban commander at 3,100 meters who never saw the bullet coming. "This is what I am," she said quietly to Marcus, to herself, to whatever gods might listen. "I am someone who can kill at distances that should not be possible. I am someone who carries every death I deliver. I am someone who saves lives by being willing to take them. I do not know if that makes me good or bad. I just know it makes me necessary." She broke down the rifle and packed it carefully. Tomorrow she would start teaching at the Scout Sniper School. She would train young Marines like Curry how to shoot, yes, but more importantly how to live with shooting. She would help them understand that being exceptional at something terrible was still better than letting innocent people die when you had the skills to prevent it. She would work with Madrigal to develop programs that addressed the psychological cost of sniper operations, making sure future operators did not spend years running from themselves the way she had. She would consult with Callahan's SEAL teams, providing expertise that came from experience measured in kilometers and lives. She would never stop mourning Marcus. She would never stop carrying the weight of every person she had killed. But she would also never stop using her skills to protect people who could not protect themselves. Both things were true. Both things were her. As she drove away from the hillside, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beside her, infinite and indifferent. Somewhere in the world, threats were gathering. Somewhere, people would need protection that only someone with her particular skills could provide. Somewhere, another impossible shot was waiting to be made. And for the first time in 3 years, Corporal Deanna Rothwell felt ready to make it. Not because she had healed, not because the weight had gotten lighter, but because she had finally accepted that some weights were meant to be carried, that some skills were meant to be used, and that honoring the dead meant living fully as what they had helped you become. She was a weapon. She was a guardian. She was a teacher. She was a person still learning how to be human while doing inhuman work. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.